Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy these live streams, like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI and sign up. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. They'll forward you to my Amazon author page. And before we dive in, I would like to thank new patron Gustavo Brito for joining up, becoming a member of our community. Thank you so much for subscribing to my Patreon. I appreciate you, and I look forward to sharing more art and process with you. Okay, I see Chris is in the chat. How you doing, Chris? Good to see you. Thanks for dropping in. Today, we're going to do something a little different. Not crazy different, but just a little different. So I had an idea. I was reading a newsletter, and I saw somebody shared a bunch of covers of the old pulp Shadow novels, the character, the Shadow. And I thought to myself, I just had an idea for doing a very, very simple version of a black version of that character. And I thought, who would I pick to base that character on? Because most of the time I'm just sketching out of my head, and then I like to pull reference afterwards. But I thought this time, why not start by building the character design around, a specific actor? And I thought, who's one of the dopest actors of our time? Why not try building a pulp character design around Denzel? So we're going to do a Denzel-inspired Pulp Hero. And I don't know about you guys, this sounds real fun to me. And hopefully you guys will think that this process of just watching it is fun. There's a lot of different ways of designing characters. I like to start with tons of thumbnails, usually. But for this one, I'm just going to start here and go in and say, all right, so I have a photo that I can draw over. And the first element that I'm thinking is the mask. And I decided I'm going to start with a simple yellow mask. Not yellow, orange. An orange mask. So in fact, let's say that this mask covers maybe the bottom of his ears. I don't really know if it's going to go all the way up. So this is one of the first things you start thinking about when you're designing characters is like, well, how much of his face is going to be covered? So I could have it go below his ears. In fact, let's start with it ending at his ears, and then we can try some other versions. So instead of having it go above, let's try having it end right at his ears. So meaning the mask would kind of go under there, because to me, naturally, it sounds like if it's covering part of his nose, it should be covering kind of the lower earlobe. And then let's say it gets covered by the collar of the shirt that he's wearing. Kind of looks like a Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. this eraser a little bit smaller. And I think what I want to do is have it come in like that, and then just have it come up like a little bit of a peak just over his nose. So come in like this. And then when we get to his nose, it'll go up a little bit, over, back down. Now, I could just keep painting on this layer, but I know myself well enough to know that I'm probably going to get part of the way in and then go like, nah, I want to erase a bunch of this. So I think instead, I'm going to put a clipping mask on this layer that I've drawn. So I can just draw above on this shape. And Chris asks, what are you doing? Fair question. So I'm doing a character design for sort of a pulp hero, and I wanted to kind of base it off of a Denzel Washington. So I'm starting with I've got a picture of him for reference, and I've got a 3D model that I'm going to build the whole rest of the costume on top of. And this is just sort of a different approach from the way that I normally do character designs, where it's just tons of thumbnails. And I thought, let me just start and see, just what it feels like to kind of, I don't usually draw directly on top of photos as reference, but I just wanted to try this process out, see how it felt. All right. Let's just give a little bit of bulk right here, like there's going to be some folds. And now, clipping mask. And let's take the orange, go into a darker and redder orange. So the other side of the chin is going to be about here. And what's funny is for many, many years, I hardly ever used clipping masks when drawing. But I have found in recent years that just the flexibility of being able to, let me drop the opacity on this so I can build up a little bit, drop it a little bit more. Really, I just want to respect the cheekbones and then put a little bit of fabric fold in there. But having that flexibility of being able to paint to the edge of a surface and not worry about having to repaint areas when you decide you want to change stuff. It's more that now that I find myself doing a lot more changing, sculpting, moving things around, and clipping masks are really useful for keeping a base layer or a base level of color while having all the other things you want to add on a separate layer. And I see Martin's in the chat. Hey, Martin, how you doing? I am doing a Denzel-inspired pulp character. I don't have a good name for him yet, but sort of like, what if Denzel was the shadow? me come in with a slightly redder and a little bit darker, just to add some darker than that. Let's go down here. So instead of using black line art, I can use a dark reddish, a dark desaturated red. Throw in some lines under here. Let's see. Thank you, Martin. He says, I like your character design. He says, all of them so far. Well, I appreciate that. Character design is an area where I still feel like I have a lot of room to grow and learn in my own process, because it is definitely an art unto itself beyond just the storytelling aspect of comics and visual story. But I appreciate that you dig the designs that I have shared thus far. And you can tell, I'm not a photorealistic artist. None of this is to make it feel like an exact, this is what a cloth mask around his face would look like. This is me just sort of illustrating shape and form and giving a little bit of a vibe. So I'm just going to throw a little bit of highlights in here, and then I'm going to switch to the full body version. I haven't even decided, like I was going back and forth between whether I want to give him a hood or not. So I may jump back and forth between this one and the full body costume. And I see Red in the chat. Hi, Red. How you doing? Thank you for joining us. Try and adjust the mic a little bit more. All right, let me just go back to the base red. And from here, let's just push this into a lighter color. I don't know if I even really need to adjust anything else, just warming it up. Just say right down the middle there. That might be too much. Bring this back over a little bit. It's really easy to go out of control when you're doing stuff like this. To go over the top with highlights. Excuse me. think I may have gotten a little bit too saturated with those highlights there. In fact, let me just erase them down a little bit. That's another thing about working with the clipping mask is instead of having to go through and erase and repaint, I can just come in here and the base color is still underneath. So I can just remove just enough to knock it back a little. And I can come back in, paint a little bit on the center of his nose, then a little bit on the side. Let's see here. So Red asks, what are you doing? And I am designing a Pulp Hero character, and I'm kind of inspired by Denzel Washington. So I'm kind of building it off of a base of a photo of him. And I'm just getting ready to move over to the rest of the costume. And Martin says, I think less photorealistic is more. Our brains interact with it more. It's funny. There's something, it goes back to, I'm sure it studies farther back than that, but not really a study. But I remember the first time that I read Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, and he showed a series of illustrations of a smiling face, and one was a happy face, and then was a happy face, but a little bit more detailed rendered than another happy face. And so you got to a comic book illustrated face of someone smiling. Then you move from the comic book illustrated face to slightly more realistic to at the end a photo of a smiling face. And his idea was saying that the idea when rendering something, photorealism is specific, but cartoony, the more cartoony and iconic it is, the more universal it is. And more people can relate to and adapt to it, as opposed to when you see a photo, it's that person. So yeah, and I think that's true with rendering as well, is that you can create something that's kind of a universal ideal of something instead of doing the exact thing. And it just depends on, both are simply tools to be used. Now, for me, photorealism isn't my strength, so it's not a tool that I rely on a lot of. I don't rely on often, but there's times when doing something that is photorealistic, dropping a texture in or drawing on top of a photo, is very useful for a goal that someone's trying to accomplish, versus, doing more iconic. Let's see here. Red says, I'm good. I just finished making 2 panels for my comic. I'm happy to hear that. It's always making progress, day by day. That's how you do it, line by line, panel by panel. Good job. Let's see here. Martin says, storytelling is the heavy work, in my opinion. Storytelling and composition. I definitely agree with you there in a lot of ideas. I feel like, let me just add a clipping layer to this so I can kind of start drawing his costume on here. Oh, no, I don't want a clipping layer on that one. Let me delete that. I already have a layer in here with this costume with briefs on. I'm going to put another layer on top. I don't need a clipping mask. I'm just going to draw on top. Yeah, I mean, for me, storytelling, the nice thing with composition, it comes down to, it can be something that is photorealistic. It could be a film. It can be a cartoon or a comic. But getting those iconic elements that make up the story that you're trying to convey, that to me always feels like the most important part. And then the way in which a story is executed, that can take many different forms. And I like different forms. I don't want everything to be a live action drama. I don't want everything to be a Pixar animated film. I like, animated drama. I like, stop motion. I like the idea of seeing the variety of ways in which things can be executed. Hell, I don't go as often as I should. I haven't been in a long time, but I like live theater, going and just watching people performing on a stage and expressing something with just minimal props and really just the human emotion of watching people interacting with each other. Let's see here. James is in the chat and he says, yeah, you're not trying to be John Bolton. Very, very true. Yeah, John Bolton is an amazing comic book illustrator, painter. He did a lot of Vertigo covers over the years. He's done stuff for most of the work I know is his DC work. And I know he did, there was a great Man-Bat. So not Batman, but the Kurt Langstrom, the guy who took a giant serum and turned into a bat. He did a great Man-Bat miniseries a long time ago. Wow, he's done so many like special DC projects that it's kind of hard for me to because he never really was a guy who worked on a long run on a particular comic. It was more just sort of, he always did amazing covers and would have like mini series here and there, but painted, photorealistically painted. It's almost like he was Alex Ross before Alex Ross, although I think that he and Alex Ross are contemporaries and John Bolton just was seen in DC more before Alex Ross. But yeah, and that's actually another thing. John Bolton, just to compare him to Alex Ross still heightens, even though his work is very photorealistic, he still sort of heightens it in a superhero-ish way. And I would say John Bolton really does feel like you're looking at, like, it's almost more like visual effects, where when you look at his paintings, you're seeing, whether it's superheroic stuff, it still looks like, wow, this is like what this would be in our world. Let's see here. And Red asks, did you see Tracy J. Butler's art? And yes, I did. I went and I looked up her work online. Very, very cool. It seemed, I'm trying to remember, if I remember correctly, I thought that it had a little bit of an anime feel to it. Or it might have been, that might be my brain filtering in some other artists that I looked at. Because I honestly, throughout the day and the week, I look at a ton of different artists, either just scrolling through Instagram or just checking out different people's profiles. But I do remember checking out Tracy J. Butler's artwork and being very, very impressed. Very, very cool. Great stuff. So I'm going to give him... In fact, I think I'm being kind of timid about this character design. I really need to just get in here and do what I'm thinking, which is I want to give him a trench coat and have the inside of the trench coat be orange. But yeah, Red, thank you for pointing me towards Tracy J. Butler's artwork. It was very cool. I dig checking it out. Let's see here. And Chris also says, in terms of with Martin, in terms of storytelling and composition doing the heavy work, Chris definitely agrees. So we're all on the same page with that one there. Red says, along with storytelling and composition, it says, and emotions and surroundings to put effect on what characters are feeling. Yeah, and I'll tell you, environment is something that I have not spent nearly enough time studying and applying to my my character designs. Let's give this guy some pants. He's just walking around, boxer briefs, and a long coat. Let me give him some pants and shoes, and then we can kind of get into more of what I'm thinking character design wise. Let's see here. And Amar is in the chat. Amar, afternoon. Good to see you, man. How you doing? Hope you are well. Red says, I mean, look at Watchmen, for example. It's always a story in each panel in the Watchmen comics. Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I think that that's why the Watchmen stands the test of time in terms of like being one of the all-time best graphic novels ever told. I mean, I have an incredible amount of respect for both Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. And that's a recommendation I can give you guys is if you have not checked out Dave Gibbons, I think it's called How Comics Work, but he has a book that's basically a retrospective of his career, but it's meant to give you sort of a breakdown of what he's done and how he did it. So it's sort of like it'll go through like his Green Lantern work, which I still have not read, but I very much want to now. A lot of his early comic work, various superheroes, Vertigo series that he has written and drawn, like his originals, work that he's done with Frank Miller. And through all these different phases, he goes through and shows you, you know, his thought process, whether it's character design, whether it's environments, vehicles, and he does address writing and lettering because he does that a lot for his own work as well. Dave Gibbons is one of those guys where he is a consummate comic book storyteller, but he's done all of the things in comics. Not that he's worked a lot as a letterer, but he has lettered a lot of his comics. He's been working long enough where sometimes a letterer and inker also lettered their own pages too. And so he's lettered comics, he's inked comics, he's colored his own work. You know, he's done it all. He's done it all at the top of the craft. Like in terms of like one of the best creators in comics, you know, not just in history, but contemporary still working. He has been and continues to be one of the best. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that book. Let's see. I'm going to end up painting over this, but I'm just going to put sort of an orange belt in the middle. It's kind of a placeholder, but his jacket is going to be over that. Just throwing in simple triangle shape here for the, not a triangle, but simple wedge for the shoes. I can come back later and put some highlights on, actually separate the shoes from the suit itself. Now, see, this is something that's kind of interesting is I need to figure out where I want, because I was going to give him a vest. And I need to figure out where I want that vest to come up, or how far I want it to go down. Do I want to have a belt above the vest or below the vest? In fact, I'm going to erase this just for a little while I try to sort out what I want to do with these other elements. Because what I'm going for is, in fact, do I even want to have this wider like that? I want to have it so you can see the lining, the inside lining of the coat, and have that inside lining be orange. And kind of frame silhouette him. Okay, let's see here. James has got an interesting question. This might lead me into a detour here. If you like how an action in a panel is depicted or how it's framed, should you take from it and put your own spin on it? What's your advice? You can't really copyright, excuse me. Pardon me. Allergies are still killing me. He said you can't really copyright how a panel looks. Also, Frank Miller had some interesting panel arrangements with Daredevil. Well, in terms of copying the action or the framing of a panel, I think that to some degree, you're absolutely right. You can't, copyright how a panel or a piece of action is framed. But there's also the idea of homage versus aping someone else's style. So I think it depends on how long ago the particular piece you're looking at came out. Because if it's something like a Kirby panel, I think most people will say, all right, well, if it's Kirby, if it's somebody who's passed, you're doing an homage. But if you're just grabbing from whatever is on the comic stands today and grabbing whatever comic composition you see, I think it really is a matter of how unique that particular panel composition is. So, for instance, I don't know if you've heard of Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work. But as somebody who's trying to produce comics very quickly during the 50s and 60s, it became really common for artists to have a shorthand. And to be honest, back then, comic artists totally ripped each other off all the time. That was actually quite common. But, a lot of times people would resent someone ripping off their work and then just claiming it as their own when all they're doing is just doing almost like a copy paste of other people's panel compositions and just mashing them together into your own. I think you said something very important. You said, and put your own spin on it. And I think if you put your own spin on anybody's work that you're inspired by, that is absolutely the best way to go, is to not lift it directly, but try to change it and adapt it, not only so it fits your story, but also so that it has a little bit more of uniqueness to it. If you can find a way to add your own personal flavor to whatever that is, I would highly recommend that as a way to go. For me, I've spent so many years reading comics that for a lot of stuff, like there's a lot of story panel compositions from Walt Simonson, John Byrne, Frank Miller, Howard Chaykin. They're kind of like just baked into my head. And sometimes I will, even if I'm talking to the creators, I'll say, I'm going to use a Byrne shot here. I'm going to use like a Byrne, up angle breaking through shot of a bunch of characters kind of charging. Or, I kind of want to do a Howard Chaykin character charging up, symmetrical composition. Did I say Howard Chaykin? I meant Walt Simonson. Kind of a Walt Simonson he does very powerful symmetrical compositions when he's showing a character doing something iconic, um, maybe doing something like that. So I think that what it comes down to is copying, but trying to make it feel enough like your own work that someone isn't going to say you're doing nothing but copying. It's copying and then adding. Um, if that makes any sense, that is the approach that I would take. So I don't know if that's particularly helpful to you, because I think what you said, you kind of answered your own question in terms of putting your own spin on it. I absolutely advocate that, and I feel that it's impossible to make comics without looking at a bunch of other comics and being influenced. And I think what's actually an even better way, now that I think of it, is to try and combine creators. So if you can look at a shot that might have sort of a Frank Miller type feel to it, that if you're like, all right, I can take this and it has sort of a Frank Miller feel to it, but what if I also inject a little bit of Ketshiro Otomo, the creator of Akira, adding a little bit of Otomo feel. If you can try to combine the feeling of two different creators' compositions, that's another way in which you're being more inventive. And I think over time, that's how you have creators who create their own look or feel. And all of this is very challenging when you talk about the fact that comic books as a medium has been around for, I mean, it's still a fairly young medium, but in the time that comics have existed, so many people have pulled from each other, tried so many different ways of storytelling, composition, that it's hard, damn near impossible, to not be influenced by others in doing that. Let's see here. Let's see here. And Chris asks, how do you get the Watchmen comics? He's talking to Red. And Red mentions, my cousin bought it from America for me as a gift. I will tell you that I'm not sure what kind of library system in whatever country you're in, whether the library system connects to any digital assets. But in the US, there's a company called Hoopla. And what they do is they allow people who have library cards to access the digital collections of their local libraries. And while I have read Watchmen and I own a physical copy of Watchmen, if, let's say, I, for some reason, just did not have access to my physical copy, Hoopla allows you to, if your local library does have a digital edition of it, to check that out, and then you can read it on your computer, on your phone, whatever device you have. And I don't know if Hoopla is available internationally, but it's worth looking at Hoopla or Libby or whatever digital providers there are for library content, and see if you can get a copy just to read online. And I do actually recommend the physical book, because if you're reading digitally, especially if you're reading in a panel by panel flow, you're going to miss the most important thing about excuse me, I got a phlegm frog in my throat, something. Give me a second. Yeah, summer allergies. I've just had a constant bit of phlegm that's always coming up. It's gross. It's nasty. I wish it would just stop, but it seems to keep bugging me here. Um, but in terms specifically of studying the compositions in Watchmen, I think that either looking at it on a tablet where you can see the whole page at once, or reading the physical comic, is really the best way to get a sense of what Dave Gibbons does from panel to panel and how he treats the composition of the whole panel in Watchmen, because those whole panel compositions are quite remarkable. You see how much he is able to convey on the page, how much the story transforms from moment to moment. And sometimes he'll just do really, really subtle shifts, but he can do dramatic changes. Seeing the full panels of Watchmen, that's a masterclass in composition. I mean, if you really want to study composition and storytelling, I don't know if you can really do much better than just reading Watchmen. I mean, the writing alone is amazing, but yeah, Dave Gibbons' storytelling in that book is just some of the finest that's ever been done in comics. Let me get caught up on the comments here. Let's see. Red says, I've been studying Dave Gibbons for a long time. And he mentions with the character I'm designing, he looks like a Power Ranger. Yeah, you know what? The bright colors, I could definitely see that having a Go-Go Power Rangers vibe. I'm still trying to decide. I thought about giving him a hood, because I didn't want to just give him a hat, a fedora like the Shadow hats. I was trying to decide how I wanted to make him different. I may play with a hood. In fact, maybe I'll throw that on next. Let's see here. Red says, yeah, I just put my own spin on. Put on my own spin, but more interesting, because I always search for interesting panels. Let's see here. If I fail, I go back to sleep, look at panels for arts for a minute, try something to pack a punch. Oh, this is good news, James. Thank you for looking that up and sharing it. James says, yeah, Hoopla would probably have it, Watchmen. And he says it's available in the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. So all of those countries there, you can get it. I don't know if they've got it in the UK, but you should look and see if there's any UK version of a digital library system where you can just put in your library card and access their online archive. And also, thank you for the tip. James says maybe drink some water. I've been drinking coffee, but yeah, I'm going to take a quick sip of water. Ugh. And thank you, Red says, I hope you get better soon. Me too. This seems to happen every summer. The weather changes, the pollen just shoots up into the air every time the heat goes up, and it ends up where I'm like just hacking up a lung for like weeks on end. So I apologize for that. Really gross, not sexy for a live stream. Let's see. Let me put on another layer here, and let's try a hood and see how that looks. just drop this down. Not really play with the normally I like to, if I'm putting something in shadow, play with the color temperatures, but for this I'm just gonna this layer on multiply. Drop the opacity and let's put a little shadow. You know what? Let's go ahead and move this on top so I can actually have this shadow paint over a little bit of the inside back there too. Now, I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this, but I think I'm going to put a layer on here and just go in with line and try to work out stuff like buttons and other details. And then I can just sort of paint over that. Let's see here. Red says, funny, because Watchmen was made by a British artist. Yeah, I feel like it definitely should be something that in the UK should be widely available, widely read. And I don't know that it is or isn't. I haven't looked into that aspect of it. But let's see here. So let's say he's got on a vest underneath that coat. And this is one of the things where, even though I started with the idea of just a simple mask like that, it may end up being that the mask may end up going all the way in and down, like covering like it goes into his shirt, or I may make something in his collar go up and over it. I don't really know yet. And that is kind of the point of character design, is to sit here and test out ideas. So let's just go like a 3-button vest. And let's say the coat comes down and then it's blowing out in the wind a little bit. Let's see here. Amar says, "What's going on in this stream?" And Red says, "Making designs for his comic." Amar says, "Thanks. I figured it would be comic related." Yeah, and this one, I don't know if this guy is actually going to. He's not going to be in my next comic, but I just had an idea for wanting to try out this more drawing over a photograph. Well, the first one is drawing over a photo of Denzel Washington, but then I wanted to try building the character over a simple 3D model, see how that looked. Let's see here. Red says probably a UK, probably the UK banned Watchmen comics because it's too violent. And you know how UK be to violent comics? No, see, this is something oddly enough that I did not know. So if you and other UK viewers could enlighten me, I know that there's definitely a lot less tolerance for violence than say in US content. But I always figured with stuff like Judge Dredd in 2000 AD that you could still very much tell some dark and violent stories in the UK. I didn't realize that they were really they really cracked down on something like Watchmen or V for Vendetta. Because to be honest, as much as I love Watchmen, when it comes to Alan Moore, I know we're moving away from Dave Gibbons in that, but V for Vendetta is actually my favorite Alan Moore comic, and that's not easy to come to because there's a reason why Alan Moore is considered one of the greatest comic writers of all time. Like all of his books are amazing, but V for Vendetta, I think was probably my favorite. All right. Well, as I'm doing this, I'm realizing that I'm gonna have to cut in on this suit to get the feeling that I want, the silhouette that I want. So I'm gonna come back now to this bottom layer, and I'm gonna erase out some of this. That at 100% opacity so I can really get in here and block that in. An attempt to give him like really broad shoulder pad shoulders. I may have gone a bit extreme. With the silhouette of the coat here. I need to bring that in a little bit. So let's see here. And Amar says, trying other methods to speed up your character designs. And, you know, I feel like speed is usually the main reason for doing anything in comics, to produce comics quicker, faster. For me, it's not necessarily about being, in this case, it's not really about, oh, this will make me work faster. It's more about, I just want to see how my brain interacts with different approaches. That may be to my detriment, but that's how I look at a lot of these things, is just constantly experimenting, tweaking, trying out new things, and seeing how my brain responds. You know what? Let's see what happens if I go ahead and say screw it and just let this go all the way down here. Underneath his vest. So yeah, it's not necessarily about speeding up my process in this case. I'm just trying stuff out. I feel, see, because here's the thing. Sometimes when you work fast, the good thing about working fast is you don't have time to think, and you just respond reactively, and you get a lot out of your work that's in your subconscious. And you don't even necessarily know why you made something, but you can discover things quicker by just going and going and going. But by the same token, my personality is a meditative personality. I like to think things over, mull them over, contemplate, which, yeah, it does lead to me working slower than I really should. But I enjoy kind of like slowly picking through and refining ideas and slowly developing them. I like coming back in here and being a little bit more sculptural. Things like this hood. Come back in there and erase a lot of those that shadow that's above it. Go. So yeah, the meditative thing may not serve me well in terms of productivity, but I'm just always interested in seeing, like, every time you changed your working method, it gives you a new perspective on the process, and sometimes it gives you insights that you weren't aware of. James says, I wasn't aware of the violence in terms of like UK content. He says, I mean, gore and sexual content was depicted in UK horror movies in the 70s. I think that, America tends to be more puritanical about sexual content and nudity. You wouldn't know that from watching HBO, but we tend to have a lot more restrictions, obviously, on sex, whereas with violence, watch kids can play video games and watch games where people's heads are getting blown off and chopped off and left and right. It doesn't matter. And my understanding in Europe is that, they don't really have any problems with human sexuality, but do curb some violent content. But I wasn't aware that something like Watchmen was ever banned or would be banned. Let's see here. And Red says, that's crazy if they ban V for Vendetta because it teaches people to stand up to bullies. Yeah, I mean, the whole point of V for Vendetta is that it's an Orwellian nightmare dictatorship, kind of like 1984. And yeah, censorship plays a big part in that story. And I think maybe that's part of the reasons why I'm drawn to it. James mentions Overdrive might also have Watchmen, but I haven't used it. And you know what? Well, the other app that I use is one called Libby, and the app is powered by Overdrive. So I think Libby is the name of Overdrive's like tablet and phone audiobook and book device, and I'm pretty sure it's on there too. Let's see here. Oh, well, that's kind. Red says, even you're not trying still looks beautiful. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And Amar says, you there we go. There we go. Amar says, you like to stew. He says, instead of a microwave, you're a crock pot. That is definitely the that's it. I'm crock pot Jeremy. That's how I roll. And so Martin says, what is the personality of the character? I am thinking that he is, well, again, I don't know if I you guys saw this part in the beginning where I first was drawing over Denzel, but he's definitely stoic. And you know what? Let's give him just a stripe on the shoulders. I don't know what made me do that. That's just one of those things where I'm looking at this and I'm like, huh, how's this feel? Maybe even have it run down the arm. That's one of those maybe things. This is one of those that would change a lot throughout a book or throughout a character design phase. But I think it looks cool for character design. So his personality, stoic, intense, intimidating. I think if you've ever seen the movie Denzel Washington's version of Man on Fire, that character that is on a mission, but also feels like he has done some horrible things that he has to atone for, that is who I am picturing for this. So originally, I think I had said that he was inspired by, I wanted to see about what it would look like to have like a black version of the Shadow. And, you know, the whole point of the Shadow, I can't remember what his personality was, but it was something kind of like Moon Knight, where he was a criminal, had done bad things, and I do not know enough about the Shadow's mythology to quote it back correctly. But basically, similar to Moon Knight, that he was given a chance to atone for his sins, now fighting against evil. And that's kind of what I'm thinking about this guy is in Man on Fire, Denzel plays a man who is possibly CIA, they're never specific, but ex-special forces of some sort. And that he has definitely done things in his career that haunt him. And now he's working for, oh, wait. I see what's happening here. That's on a different layer. So let me just erase this here. You know what? I might as well just take this layer, merge these two, and just draw on this. Anyway, in Man on Fire, Denzel plays a man who's ex-special forces, who has definitely done some dirt, and it haunts him. And he's working as a private bodyguard for a family. To protect their daughter, because kidnappings in Mexico City are rampant, which is based on sort of like a real life problem. I'm not sure what how the issues are in Mexico City these days, but at the time of the movie, that was one of the points, is that there was a big problem with kidnappings in Mexico City. And Denzel, as intense as he is, he bonds with this kid, and it's almost like the whole point is that him protecting this child, and when she does eventually get kidnapped, he goes on a rampage to get her back, and it's sort of like him trying to atone for all the things he's done in his past. So I see this character as somebody who has done some dirt, and it haunts him, and he is trying to, instead of rescuing a kidnapped child, he's trying to fight evil to atone for the things that haunt him. So that is kind of what I see. So as opposed to a Batman who is on a mission of vengeance, this guy is on a mission of atonement. So that is a very, very long explanation. But Martin, it's important that you asked that, because until the moment you asked that, I hadn't really said, what is this guy's personality? What drives him? What's his motivation? And motivation is a very, very important part of character. And it's one that I don't know if I really thought about in terms of character design. And I might not have thought of it if you hadn't asked. So I am very, very glad you asked. Let's see here. Let's see here. And Red said he doesn't know if he's going to add it or not. I'm not sure what part we were talking about when I said that. So it might have been the hood. You know how I am. I jump all over the place. Let's see here. James says, I should have read V for Vendetta when I was dealing with a bully. Yeah, I mean, it's, dealing with childhood bullies, obviously it continues to be a problem. I don't know how helpful V for Vendetta would have been with dealing with bullies as a kid, because for the most part, it's laying booby traps for them and killing them, which I don't advocate. But it is a very great story. I mean, I can't say that there's anything by Alan Moore that I would say, oh no, you shouldn't read this. I think you can kind of like, well, nah. I mean, I read Lost Girls just to see what all the hubbub was about, and Lost Girls I didn't really care for. I don't think that it should be banned, but I didn't love it compared to everything else that he's done. I really just wanted to read it because I wanted to see why it was so controversial, and I saw why it was so controversial, but I still was like, not everything is going to be for me. And that's another thing. People always tend to say, this book should exist, this book shouldn't exist. This book should be banned, or everyone should love this, or you're an idiot. And I just do not subscribe to that worldview. I absolutely believe that there's different books for different tastes. And even if you have a creator where you love most of their work, if they do one particular piece that you absolutely do not like, that does not mean that, oh, they've lost a step and they're not good anymore. And it does not mean that they, shouldn't be read by anyone anymore. It means that that particular work of art was not for me. That's how I feel about it. I'm very much against the idea of, banning any books. And, even books that have ideas or stories that I find distasteful, I just feel like, if I really don't like something, I'm not the audience for it. Either that person will do something else and I'll read the thing that I do like, or maybe if all of their work isn't distasteful, then it just means I don't like that person's work. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be allowed to create, and they shouldn't create work for the people that do love their work, their storytelling, their craft. I feel that way about film, TV, all kinds of books. Just not everything has to be what I like, what makes me feel good, what satisfies me. So, and it just seems so weird that we live in this world where everyone wants to say, this shouldn't exist because I don't like it. It just seems insane to me. Let's see here. Let's see here. Amar says all of it when there are restrictions is always political. Amar says so he's like most of the Liam Neeson roles. Well, believe it or not, I've still never seen Taken. I've seen lots of Liam Neeson films. I will just have to take your word for it, not having seen the work myself to judge. But yeah, maybe he's a very Liam Neeson type. But like I said, I started with Denzel, and if anything, he's probably the most like. Well, he's the most like the character from Man on Fire, since that was the real inspiration. But if I were to say also The Equalizer, because that's the most recent Denzel movie that I watched. And in The Equalizer, he's a guy who has a past where he's done some dark stuff, but he seems like he's trying to find peace. But trouble keeps following him. It doesn't even need that line there. Let's just switch this. Yeah, but he's the character who's trying to find peace. But violence kind of keeps following him. So let's say that this guy is more like that than anything else. Red says he's kind of like the character from Avatar, The Last Airbender. Well, honestly, sadly, I've only seen a few episodes from season 1 of Avatar. I do want to watch the whole series. I just have not made time for it. So I'm not sure which character he's like. Z here. Amar says Spawn is stoic as well. Yes, very true. Amar says, hey, Jeremy. Good to see you, Amar. Hey. Oh, Omar. Amar's here too, but Omar. I got Omar, Amar hanging out. Hey, Omar. And James says, I'm going to watch Inside Man soon. Speaking of Denzel Washington. Inside Man is a good film. It's very, very different because it's a Spike Lee film. And obviously Spike has worked with Denzel before. But for me, it's very different from Spike's other movies because this one it's a crime mystery. And it feels very, very different from anything I've seen from Spike Lee before, and honestly, very different from any of the movies he's made after. I think you'll enjoy it, but I think be prepared for a different type from what you would expect from Spike Lee. It does very much feel like a movie you would expect from Denzel, but it is a very different Spike Lee movie, and it's a fun Spike Lee movie. I liked it. It's a fun kind of whodunit where it jumps around, shows different people's points of views and possible motivations. It's a fun movie. It's a smart movie. I think you'll enjoy it, but it runs at its own pace. It's not like as snappy as a lot of Spike's movies. So one of the first things I did on this guy was I drew a belt, and I drew it in a spot where I did not like it. So now still too wide. Let's see here. So I've got his belt kind of underneath the vest there. And now the real question is, what kind of weapons would he have? Because I almost feel like I want to have him be somebody who isn't just using guns, because, you know, everybody's got guns. I don't know, maybe some sort of sticks, combat sticks. I don't know. I think I may have to work on this a little bit more after the stream, because this is getting a bit long here. Let me get through and catch up on the comments before we wrap up here. Oh, and by the way, tomorrow, Monday night, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Monday, we're doing our Patreon exclusive live streams, the Art Book Study Group. So for everyone who's a patron, you know, that's going to be happening tomorrow night. And if you are not a patron, you can subscribe at patreon.com/Jeremy, and you can join in. And you also have the archive of all the previous sessions that you can watch. And we do deep dives into some of the best art books around, try to suck out all the knowledge we can. And I realized I should probably give you guys the heads up on that before we wrap up the stream. So I think I'm going to slow down on the drawing here and just get caught up on the last few comments before we call it a day. And let's see here. Amar says, I tend to create nonchalant standoff characters, which is part of my personal characters. Let's see here. Red giving a shout out to Dr. Omar. Amar says, about Denzel. He says he did a callback in that last Equalizer movie by then having a little girl, having the then little girl as an agent in this movie, which he protects her again. Yes, they reunite, because in Man on Fire, the little girl who's kidnapped is Dakota Fanning. And Dakota Fanning, as an adult, appears as as I want to say an Interpol agent that's trying to track some criminals, and Denzel intervenes and kind of like, well, at first he's just trying to pass on a tip about some people that he killed that were doing some dirt. All he's doing is just passing on a tip. But that draws her in. She starts following him, and it kind of turns into a whole. It's a nice thing of reuniting those two characters, and it is very much a callback to a very different version of a relationship that they had on Man on Fire. But it was very good. I really liked the Equalizer trilogy. I think that's one of the best things. And Denzel does not do sequels usually. The Equalizer, I think, was the first time he did a sequel and then did a trilogy of them. And, you know, it was worth the wait, because it's one of his best series of works. Let's see here. Red says, I have this character who's also a bodyguard, but turned evil because he's a genetically modified human living at peak, saying a line that is 5 minutes. That's all you get from me. That's interesting. I don't know. I think that it's probably too much for you to explain here, but saying that he's a genetically modified turned evil because he's genetically modified. I mean, usually you hope that someone who's genetically modified becomes good, or somehow it's something that they can use to help other people. I don't know. See here. Martin says, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Red, to Omar. And Amar says, yeah, motivation or via conflict is how I create characters. Let's see here. It said, yeah, James. Oh, yeah, going back to Alan Moore. James says his Swamp Thing run is great. And that's another one where I've read the first volume of his run on Swamp Thing. I don't think I even got to the point where John Constantine was introduced. So the character John Constantine, Hellblazer, was actually created by Alan Moore during his Swamp Thing run. And then he's gone on to become a popular character on his own. So it's another character that he has laid out there for the rest of the world. Let's see here. Neymar says, V for Vendetta was after my childhood bully days. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty powerful story. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. And I'm sorry for everyone who's gone through and had to survive bullying. And hopefully those bullies somehow learned to change their ways and express whatever anger or hurt was causing them to hurt other people, learned how to deal with it in a positive way. Let's see here. Amar's got a lulls. See, this is the problem with me going on for a long time and then trying to catch up with the comments, is that I'm playing stuff that was stuff we were talking about 20 minutes ago. James says, Alan Moore, he says he's one of the first people that comes to mind when I think of Swamp Thing. I mean, I also go back to, I think it was Len Wein who originally created him. I also think of Bernie Wrightson. Yeah, Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. And then, of course, Alan Moore and John Toddleben and Alfredo Alcala. I mean, hell, he's done so many amazing. Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing, he worked with multiple amazing artists. So let's see here. Oh, yeah. Amar says, I graduated high school in 87, so there's that. Yeah, I want to say that V for Vendetta came out in like 85 or something, so just a little bit before that. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember. I mean, to be honest, I didn't even start reading comics seriously until like 89, 90 was when I started reading comics regularly. And I didn't get into like the Vertigo stuff until like probably during the Image era. Like I was reading a lot of the Marvel stuff while the Image creators were at Marvel still. And then as my taste started to mature, I started reading like Hellblazer before Vertigo existed. So I started reading right when Vertigo existed, and then the Image founders went and created Image. It's like I branched off in two different directions that were different from the mainstream. One that was taking superhero ideas and exploding them and going extreme and pushing the envelope of superhero work in the Image founders, and then one that was going more experimental and both indie but pushing in terms of horror, sexuality, and stuff that was also not in superheroes with Vertigo. So I kind of went at both paths at the same time and followed those. Let's see here. So Omar asks, do you have Facebook or Instagram? And I'm not sure if he was asking one of the other people in the chat, but if you're asking me, if you go, yes, I have both. If you go to the homepage of my YouTube channel, there should be multiple links, and one of those links should be to my my Instagram. And I can never remember whether it's Jeremy at Instagram or whether it's Jeremy B at Instagram. In fact, let me see if I can just. Oh, it's Jeremy B. So let me just copy. And I do not know how normally it doesn't allow links in the chat. But I don't know if me being the host would allow me to post a link in the chat. But I'm going to post the link to my Instagram in there. And if that comes through, awesome. But let me scroll down here. But anyway, yeah, it's just Instagram.com/JeremyB. So that is my handle on the grams. So let's see here. So Amar said, I graduated high school in 87. Red is, dang, Amar, turning into dust. Well, I'm not far behind him. So, but yeah, you hear me hacking up a lung. I'm turning into an old man over here. Amar says, it is inevitable. No, that is true. And Martin says, you're a true American. You don't believe in censorship. Well, you know what's interesting is I feel like, for me, it's not even about a patriotic thing. It's about discussing ideas. And even if there are ideas that are negative, even if there are ideas that are, you could say these ideas are dangerous to society, even if you can say that is genuinely true about certain ideas, I think discussing them and discussing why we think that they're dangerous or harmful, and not banning them, but saying let's frame a context around discussing these ideas. If you genuinely think something is harmful, then let's not just put it out. Let's not ban it, but let's say, all right, let's put a framework around this and discuss it in the context of why as a culture we think this is a bad idea. But to simply blanket remove it, I don't think that's healthy. I think that having people that have different ideas, being able to, and this is the worst thing, I think that we see a lot of divisiveness in society right now, and people on extremes of both sides of views. I think the problem is that everything is about fighting people, canceling people, and shouting people down. And I think that what we need is to have a place where people that have different points of view can sit down and talk, not debate, just talk. Like, I have friends that are conservative. I have friends that are liberal. I have friends that are extremely conservative. Well, not extremely conservative, but I do have friends that are extremely liberal. And the thing is that we don't look at each other and yell at each other about our opinions. We sit down and we talk and we share ideas. And I think that having somebody that thinks very differently from you, it's not about convincing somebody to come around to your point of view. It's just about communicating. And I've had friends who have shared ideas with me that I'm like, I'm never going to get on board with that. But I can understand why you feel that way. And I think that we really need to move back more towards getting people to, like, I feel like people are talking about how media is failing, journalism is failing us. And I think that I feel like the best way that media and journalism could help the United States right now is by trying to foster conversation and not debate. Trying to get people in the same room, just sit down and view each other as human beings, first and foremost. And I think that's something we've really, really lost. All right, that's it. I don't want to get on any more political stuff because I'm all about the art. I would much rather do that. Red asked, did any brothers ever read Mouse? Martin says Mouse years ago. Mouse was great. I actually bought I think it was the 20th anniversary hardcover edition not too long ago. And yeah, it is a fantastic book. I love Mouse. In fact, I'm due to go back and reread it. Let's see here. Amar had sent, I meant my personal characteristics when he was talking about injecting his personality into his characters. And Red says, answer me, Martin. And Red said, "What happened?" I'm not sure what the what happened was referring to. But Amar says, in terms of the Instagram link, he says that he can see it. And James says, right, maybe their ideas are different or unusual, but you shouldn't condemn them for that. He says, everyone is different, human beings, yes. And he says, reminds me of that movie, The Bigfoot Trap. He says, I have a mild interest in conspiracy-related stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see, for me, it's just the idea of people trying to cohabitate peacefully. And I don't feel right now like we're moving in a direction of people trying to genuinely get along with each other. But hang on, I'm not going to draw this on there. I'm going to draw this on the hood level up here, because I'm going to come in and put a little bit of orange trim on the... Why is that behind everything? That's not on a clipping mask. There's nothing above it. Oh, I see. Because this shadow layer that's up there, I had to turn that off. So I can put this line on there. Like this trim. So this comes down and then in, and I can paint the rest behind there. All right. Yes, and Martin says the mouse is about the Holocaust. Yeah, it's a very, very moving story where you have a bunch of cats. Basically, it's a story of all the characters are drawn as mice, and it's Art Spiegelman, the author and illustrator, is retelling his family history of his father surviving Auschwitz. And he kind of retells the whole build-up in Nazi Germany of the Nazis slowly taking over. And the Nazis are all as cats, and then all of the Jews are mice. And I can't remember if there's any other animals in the book, because I haven't read it in a while. But that's the reason why I bought the copy recently, so I can go back and reread it. Because I think that, I mean, Mouse deserves as much of a reread as Watchmen, in terms of like how great of a comic I think it is. But anyway, all right. Hang on. Okay, all right. On that note, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Let me see. So, like I said, it's a starting point for character design, sort of inspired by The Shadow, definitely inspired by Denzel. And yeah, I'm not sure what book he's going to appear in, but it was just something I wanted to experiment and play with. Let's go back to the big screen here. And again, I want to give a shout out to Gustavo Brito, a new Patreon subscriber. Thank you so much for becoming a patron, for joining our community here. And like I said, we're going to be doing a Patreon exclusive live stream tomorrow, 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you guys would like to join us, head over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a member. You get access to our Patreon exclusive Discord server, where we share works in progress, art tools, personal studies, give each other feedback, encouragement, and more. Just an ongoing discussion, expanding what we do here. I'd love to have you guys. So please head on over there and check that out. You also get access to an online archive where you can read my comics digitally. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, which inspire me creatively. You can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you would like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, I Had the Gods. It's a standalone psychological thriller about a man who's cursed with visions he cannot control. Shush. Or you can pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8. Both have extensive back matter, script excerpts, photo reference, character designs, thumbnails, and more. I basically show you how I put the whole entire comic book together. And if you want to see the insides of the book before you pick it up, go to the homepage of my YouTube channel and scroll down to flip throughs, and there are book flip throughs of all of these. So guys, hit that like button. If there's anybody you think would enjoy these live streams, hit the share button. Pass it on. Share it to some friends I think you would enjoy. Just spend some time talking some art talk, process talk, character design. But I always appreciate you guys. Appreciate you hanging out, spending time with me. I appreciate spending time with you. All right, guys. Thanks so much. That's it for now. Go be creative.